And basically, I never really realized it, but it's my life story. So, you will be involved in the story that I have to give from my aspect of not Jake and Samuel Hawken, but Art Ressel.
We can't really hear you back there. Is it okay?
Is that better or worse? Can you all hear me with this? Yeah, I sometimes have the gun and this, and I can't hold the poem, and I need to. I wrote the damn thing, and I can, at night in bed, I can talk it to myself, and it's just perfect, and it's beautiful. But if I stand up in front of a crowd, if I miss one word, it screws up the whole thing, and I don't want to do that, because it's a thing of beauty and a joy forever. As I mentioned before, I am Art Ressel, and I fell into this Hawken situation because it just happened to me along my walk through life. I owned a gun shop in St. Louis on Lindbergh, if any of you know where they are, which became famous long before the Hawken shop because of our neighbors. The most expensive thing we had at the Hawken shop was our business card, because there were 7 massage parlors next to us. The gun business, my partner and I, it was antique arms, and we bought and sold collections of fine firearms, fine guns, early guns, and so forth. My parents were in the antique business, and when I was born, I grew up with every antique you could think of. And so consequently, my knowledge grew, and as they were looking at the antiques in the shops, at the glassware, the dishes, and the china, I was off in the corner looking at the firearms and the swords and the pistols. And back in those days, I could buy a Civil War Colt for $25. And oh my gosh, the things were, well, that was expensive, but by the same token, you could acquire a lot for very little. The only time I didn't collect was when I was 4 years in the Marine Corps. And when I came out, I sold my enviable collection through Cowan's Historic Americana, which set me up in business for what I did thereafter. We were dealing in firearms, and the antique dealers all knew me and knew my family and so forth. And I got a call from one of the antique dealers one morning. He says, "Are you still playing with those guns and stuff?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "I got one you need to look at." So I drove over there and took a look at it, and it was a brand spanking new condition, full stock Hawkins plain rifle. And I took a look at that. I said, "Holy cow, where did you get this?" Well, nobody knew much about Hawkins. I did, because it was in the gun business, and it was a desirable gun, and it was a St. Louis gun, and those are the things that I had an interest in. So I said, "What do you want for it?" He said, $1,000. At that day, $1,000, he might as well have said $1 million. And I hesitated at least 2 or 3 seconds before I said, "I'll take it." Ate beans for almost a month, and got used to the fact that I didn't really like them. But that was my first Hawken rifle. And I had other St. Louis rifles. And if you're familiar with St. Louis guns, there was Dimmick and Gimmer and T.J. Albright and Adolphus Meyer and a lot of others. And they were collectible, and I had a few of those, but they were not as well known as the Hawken rifle. But at that time, they were not well known, and the Hawken rifle wasn't either. I took that rifle that I had to Friendship, Indiana for 2 years and fired it in a Hawken match. And the Gimmer Club, and bless their heart, if it weren't for the Gimmers and their donations and their ability to do what they do for us, the guns and the Hawken and the black powder would not be what it is in St. Louis area. So they deserve a lot. At any rate, we're running a good gun shop and buying and selling and trading, and had a lot of stuff that brought us first prize as far as best dealers display. So we were well known amongst the gun people. And all of a sudden, lo and behold, there came a movie by the name of Jeremiah Johnson. Well, Jeremiah Johnson was a guy up east, and took the word of Horace Greeley and went west, young man, and was supposed to build his future, either mining for gold or shooting buffalo or whatever the devil he wanted to do. So consequently, at one period in that movie, he's wearing a heavy coat and the snow is a-hole deep to a 10-foot Indian, and all of a sudden he figures out he doesn't have any way of getting food or anything else. Comes around the corner and there's a dead man holding a rifle. And he reaches down and he grabs that gun and picks it up and says, "It's a Hawken rifle." The world knew what a Hawken rifle was. Okay, about 6 months later, Thompson Center and every gun business in Italy and everywhere else were building Hawken rifles. And I said, this is sort of stupid. Look at what they're doing. I said, we need to build a Hawken rifle after all. We're the only ones who really own one. And so the Keith Neubauer that Bob was talking about, who is Prince among people, super neat, took that gun, mic'd it, photographed it, gauged it, and made all of the things that it took to make this rifle right here, which is the first prototype of the parts that the new Hawken shop that Greg has up there that he sells as an authentic Hawken rifle. And any of you that want to can come up and feel it and taste it, smell it, and know what a man's rifle is. It's 10 pounds of rifle, and it's a beautiful thing and a joy forever. Now, I have my life tied up in something now that I never really realized existed or so forth like that. And one thing led to another, and another led to another, and another led to another. And I sat down one day, because I love this gun. It did everything I wanted it to do, except 10Xs. And some of you are familiar with that, aren't you? Anyway, David Wright used to carry this. If you know David Wright, who's involved in this thing, David and I used to shoot the Hawken match together. And he told me one day, he said, "Art, there's the most beautiful 10X out there in the woods somewhere. I can just guarantee that." David didn't make it here, and we missed him too, but David and I are good friends. The times that we were together at the Hawken shop there, he'd carry my gun up the hill because I get a little out of breath walking that distance. So, but it was shot and used and loved. And as I started to say, there came a time when I sat down one day and I said, I'm going to write a story about this. Well, the wonderful thing in having an English major is the fact that I sat down and the pencil did the work. It just flowed out of there. And I didn't really realize it. But when it was finished, it was the story of my life. And that's why the other times, the 3 years that we have done this, and the other time, I set up and read a story to you that was the story of my life, and realized this time, because this is my last hurrah, that I needed to put a little emphasis into it to where you would really feel what I felt. Now, I bought that Hawken rifle, and the first one that I had, and paid $1,000 for it. And 2 years later, after I've been shooting it and so forth, I was offered $15,000 for it, and it went like a flash of lightning. Wasn't that attached to them then? In fact, I bought and sold 3 more Hawken rifles and made money off of them before I said, whoa, this may be something you want to keep. Well, eventually, when we closed the shop, I sold the collection back to the Hawken family. A lot of guns, a lot of the also-rans, a lot of the trues, a lot of the believers, a lot of the whatevers, pistols and rifles and so forth. And if you've been upstairs and looked at the collection, you'll see a hell of a lot of those guns up there on the racks. I had the pleasure of owning them, loving them, and making money from them. So it was good. I should basically continue to do only one thing, and that's carry on, read what I have to say, and there'll be a few precisions, things that I would like for you to do along with me. Hold on. Oh, where is it? Oh, good. Yeah. I've memorized this, but if I missed one portion of the thing in talking to you, it ruins the beat, and so I'm going to read it to you. But I want to ask you to do something that I hadn't thought about before, and I think it's going to help both of us. I have had audiences that I have read to that looked at it and so forth and so on, whatnot like that. I would like to ask you to close your eyes. When you read this, you don't put into it what I want you to know. If you close your eyes and I read this to you, you're going to see this in your mind and in your eyes, and it will mean more to you and to me. If I falter in my voice, you'll know why. So, crazy art Ressel, bro. He came along and wrote Old Thunder and Me, Saga of a Hawken Rifle. Close your eyes and we'll go. When once I got my mind off straight and figured where it's at, I kicked the traces of the east with just my coat and hat. I heeded Horace Greeley's words, because truly they seemed best, and set my feet ahead towards the gateway to the west. Now when I hit St. Louis town, I didn't spare a cent to outfit with the very best, because I was sure hell-bent to be the best darn mountain man that ever bore that name. So to the Hawken gun shop, eventually I came. Their rifle's reputation was a legend all its own. A gun so true and sturdy, sure the finest ever known. So rugged and so beautiful, the best that they could make was that big bore half-stock caplock made for me by Sam and Jake. It took me barely but a week of working every way to learn that rifle in and out, because sure enough, someday I'd call upon her talent in some moment of true strife, and there'd have to be that knowledge if she were to save my life. Her happy voice in times of fun would crack a cheerful sound, but her words of fear or anger would shake the very ground. A half an inch and then some was the measure of her bore. Just to face that awesome cavern would have chilled you through the core. Now I perceived a friend so true should surely have a name, a title that would tell the world that she was far from tame. Old Thunder, sure, that fit her fine. She'd answer to that call. Old Thunder will do very well, and lightning is the ball. The years were good. The years were hard but good to us. I guess we'd shared God's grace, because many times I nearly saw the old Grim Reaper's face, and more than once I cheated death or evened up a score by some help from the Almighty or Old Thunder's mighty roar. And now my time for mounting's past. My eyes are growing weak. My voice, once loud and laughing, is just a whisper when I speak. The world no longer knows us, Old Thunder and her friend, and I fear the times we once knew have come sadly to an end. I don't regret the things I've done, and Lord knows that's a heap. And I sure ain't one to ask for much. I've always earned my keep. So please, dear God, do grant me, when I hear the angel song and face the happy hunting ground, let thunder come along. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. See what I meant? Awesome. Yes. Said it all. So any of you that wants to see what Old Thunder is really like, and everybody's wondering whether I'm going to have her buried with me or not, I don't know a lot of the stories you hear about the Hawken and the Hawken shop and the Hawken rifle. A lot of people don't know. And when I say this is my last hurrah, I say that in a number of ways. I have 5 more years until I'm 100 years old. I have 5 more years until I'm 100. 1930 for those that want to do the math. I thank you so much. You've done okay this far. Pardon? You've done okay this far. Thank you. So
Art was kind of the middleman in the history of Hawken. Sam and Jake Hawken were they were out of Maryland. Their family came from Switzerland in 1750 and ended up in Hagerstown. Their father, Christian Hawken, was a gunsmith. They followed the trade. Both of them, for a little bit of time, um, worked in the Harper's Ferry arsenal. And Jake ended up in St. Louis in about 1818, and Sam followed in about 1822. When Jake got to St. Louis, he got involved with a man named, I think it's James Larkinen. And Larkinen was a gun builder, a gunsmith, had a gun business, and was also involved in real estate. And so Jake established himself there. And then in 1822, Sam left Xenia, Ohio, had a passel full of kids that he somehow managed to send back to Maryland, or somebody else looked after. But he got out to St. Louis in 1822. And in 1825, this Lankinen guy died, and Jake took over the business, and he and Sam then went in business together in 1825, hence our 200th anniversary. So they built guns, and there's a lot of speculation as to what they did. We know for a fact that they built high quality, big bore rifles that were suitable for the bigger animals in the West. The earlier guns were probably all full stock guns. There has not been a St. Louis flintlock gun found to this date. There's no history there whatsoever. I've actually read in one of the little speculative blurbs, probably, that very possibly Jake just saw the future of the gun business and started messing with percussion caps from the beginning when he was in St. Louis, because they were patented in 1815, got pretty well known in 1818 in Philadelphia, and so the cap ignition system was there and available. I find it incredibly interesting that there has never been a St. Louis marked flintlock rifle. In my mind, maybe they never built one, but that's for a whole lot of talk and controversy. There's speculation, and people are building what's called the actually flintlock, which is a big gun of big caliber that actually took up river in, I think, 1822. It's attributed to Hawken, but nobody's ever found the gun. So it's a mystery. All the writings say he had a big gun. It was a flintlock. It was a super gun, and people put the Hawken name on it because they wanted it to happen. So until we find the gun, that's just going to be another story. So Sam and Jake weren't the typical typical gun factory. They built guns around parts they acquired. They did very little of their own manufacturing. They rifled barrels that they acquired from Remington or anybody else they could get barrels from. They didn't build their own locks. They got locks wherever they could. So if you look at any of the history books, there's going to be a myriad of different locks that were in use. Where should we go from here? So anyway, they weren't a factory per se, but they built high quality, big caliber guns, and were well known for that. Actually, Sam Hawken was more interested in establishing the volunteer fire department in St. Louis than he was in his gun business. His gun business fed him, but as a service to the public in St. Louis, he helped organize, I think it was Union Volunteer Station Number 1, and was very active in the fire department. Now, Jacob died in 1849, and most people say that he was buried in a mass grave on the banks of the Mississippi River. But there's a gentleman named Charles Hanson Jr. that wrote a book called The Hawken Rifle, Its Place in History. And Hanson documents that there are records that Jake paid X amount of dollars for, or Sam paid X amount of dollars for Jake's burial clothes and his burial plot, and that he was buried in the Pennsylvania Church Cemetery, which I understand is long gone, that it's been plowed under, so we'll never know. So there's a lot of speculation about Jake because there were no pictures of him, there wasn't much written about him, there's not much documentation. Sam's legacy lived on because he was still alive and active in the community, and he lived to be 84. And when he was 82, there was a long newspaper article that was an interview of Sam Hawken, and Sam embellished himself quite well in the last interview that he gave. So he talked about some things that happened before he got to St. Louis, but thought they happened while he got to St. Louis. And so you have to take all of this stuff, kind of put it together, and hope you can pick out the stuff that's positive, and the stuff that maybe is a little bit of fiction. So in 1858, Sam got out of the Hawken rifle factory business, and he and his son went to Denver, and they built a few guns in Denver. They're marked Denver territory. But Sam went back to St. Louis, 1859 or so. Ended up with a Hawken shop again. Sold it to some people that he was involved with that worked for him, named William Watt. And I believe J.P. Gimmer was a gentleman that was part of this William Watt association. And then in 1860, J.P. Gimmer ended up with sole possession of the Hawken Rifle Company. And Gimmer stayed active until 1916. And he built some classic plains rifles. He did a lot of modifications to Sharps and Spencers and made them more in the Hawken style, and just generally gunsmith until 1916. So in 1916, he closed the place up, and it laid in storage until the mid 1960s, when a gentleman in St. Louis bought the estate and spun off the Gimmer portion of the Gimmer estate, or the Hawken portion of the Gimmer estate, and spun it off to Art. And then Art eventually went into the business of the Hawken shop. Now, Hawken never trademarked their name, so it's just out there in the public domain. But the Hawken shop, which is what Art continued, is trademarked. And we still carry that trademark today. And we're kind of proud to say that we are the Hawken brand still. That everybody else is building Hawken style rifles, we are still building the Hawken brand. And Art did a marvelous job of creating the tooling to build Old Thunder and today's version of the classic plains rifle. We're still using that tooling today. We don't make any variations from what Art had put together. We document everything as historically correct, and it does bear the S. Hawken St. Louis signature. There's a lot of people that do that, but again, I think honestly we're the only ones that can say we're the Hawken brand. And anybody have any questions or anything about this? There's got to be some question. Nothing else? Bob, I'm trying, but I thought Art was going to talk for half an hour, and I can't fill anything else in an hour. But I appreciate everybody showing up. It's nice to see some familiar faces, some current and future customers. And thank you again. If you want to see Old Thunder, it's upstairs, outside on the balcony. And you got any questions about what we're doing currently, please come up and feel free, and we'll talk about it. So thank you.